Okay, I can still see that there's some people joining us, but welcome anyway to our third webinar, part of the Networks for Nature series. I'm going to hand you over shortly to Brian MacDonald from Natural England, who's going to be chairing our session today. But we'll just give it another minute or so just for people to join. Okay, welcome everybody then. My name's Anne Cantrell. I'm running this webinar series as part of the facilitation fund through the White Peak Farmers Facilitation Group. I'm just going to hand you over to Brian MacDonald then, who's going to speak a little bit more about it and chair our session today. Over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Anne. Hello and welcome everybody. Looking forward to today's webinar on green finance unlocking its potential for nature recovery. This is the third in this webinar series, Networks for Nature, Facilitating Collaborative Farming, which is supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, Southwest Peak Landscape Partnership, and all triggered by the White Peak Farmers Group, with the drive and coordination provided by Anne and Liz, who you can see. So today's event is looking good. We've got some excellent speakers lined up to illustrate the opportunity and use their experiences to help inform this area of interest around green finance. So we have Alison Baker from the Environment Agency, who will be speaking about the Natural Environment Readiness Fund, Paul Cottington from the Southwest National Farmers Union, who will be sharing his experience from the Poole Harbour Nutrient Management Scheme, followed by Dan Turner from the Rivers Trust, who's also been involved with one of the, the Wharfdale Facilitation Fund group up in the north. And last but not least, we'll have Jenny Phelps, who will be sharing her experiences from her work, both of the Upper Thames Farmer Guardian for the Upper Thames group, and a heap of other things that Jenny's involved with, including the Upper Thames Catchment Partnership. So the format today is that each speaker has up to 20 minutes to talk to the subject. Please log your questions on the Q&A facility, which is down in the bottom right of the screen, or sorry, the bottom right of the middle part of the screen, and not the chat facility, which we'll be using for telling speakers to hurry up and get to the end of the allocated time. So use the Q&A function for that. We'll log questions through the course of the presentations being delivered, and we'll follow up with Anne will be fielding the questions directly to the relevant speakers when we get to that stage. Sadly, Paul's going to have to push off before we've completed the webinar at 2:30. But what we'll do is we'll have Alison and Paul to speak first, followed by some quick Q&As to them, and then we'll move into the second part of today's presentations with Dan and Jenny following. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to our first speaker, Alison, and good luck, Alison.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So the first logistics is sharing the screen and the presentation. So just bear with me a sec while we get that sorted out. However many times you practice it, you still need to spend a bit of time doing that. So hopefully you can all see that first slide now. As Brian said, my name's Alison Baker, and I work for the Environment Agency in our future funding team. And my role over the last few months has been to support the launch of the Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund on behalf of the Environment Agency and Defra. And I work as part of a cross-Defra team from the EA. There are a number of us working on this project, Defra's Green Finance team and staff from Natural England as well. So I've been asked today to give you a brief introduction to green finance and the role it plays in our natural environment, and an introduction to what the Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund is all about. So we haven't got an awful lot of time today, and there's obviously quite a big topic. So I will share some links via Liz and Anne later on. So I thought it would be helpful at the outset to share a short video on what green finance is. So hopefully this will play for you now. Oh, sorry. So hopefully that sets out the very basic principle of green finance. It's that private companies will invest in environmental projects that create a sustainable, that can create a sustainable income or generate revenue, and that will pay back that initial investment. So why are we interested in green finance? I think we are all aware of the huge scale of investment that's needed to tackle our climate and nature crisis. And government sees green finance at the heart of delivering a more resilient environment, delivering their 25-year environment plan goals and clean growth strategy. And the green finance strategy shown here sets out their ambition. And there's a good summary at the start of that document about what green finance is all about through the web link at the bottom. So in line with the government's strategy, we want to not just increase the level of private finance, but also to be able to demonstrate that green finance has an important role in helping us create our resilient and greener places. And we are aware increasingly that private investors are seeking both green and climate risk-based investments. But the challenge for us is that there isn't yet a pipeline of investable projects of this type to attract those investors. So it's a bit of a catch-22 process, but this is what the NEIRF funding is all about. So we want to stimulate that private investment in our natural environment, and that's one of the key objectives of the NEIRF. We want to set out how we can achieve the goals set out in the 25-year environment plan and deliver against some of its objectives for things like clean and plentiful water, thriving plants and wildlife, etc. And the NEIRF Fund will support organisations to develop their investment case, to take to private investors and obtain that investment. So think of it a bit like the Dragon's Den. We're supporting organisations to prepare their pitch to the dragons, and that's where the NEIRF funding will provide that support. So the NEIRF, it's a grant programme, and grants will be awarded on a competitive basis, depending on their ability both to deliver for the environment and be able to generate a revenue for investors. And the outcome of that fund will be developing a pipeline of investable projects. They will demonstrate a whole wide variety of investment models and provide those opportunities for investors. And one of the real key aspects of this fund is to share the learning and knowledge that's developed through funding these projects, because we want to have those case studies to demonstrate how this approach can be used, and for people to use the financial models that are developed to then go on to deliver their own projects. And the intention is that the NEIRF Fund will provide opportunities for a whole range of organisations, obviously including farmers and landowners, and I'll come a bit onto who's eligible shortly. So if we start with what we might call a typical environment improvement or protection project, What we need to consider is how we can enhance the environmental value or natural capital that the environment provides, and understand the benefits that could be generated from this. So some examples could include, for instance, creating a new wetland habitat. Could that result in cleaner water, or planting trees to store carbon? And typically, these types of environmental projects would rely on obtaining grants from the government, or perhaps philanthropic funding from trusts and that kind of approach. But the projects that will be supported by NEIRF need to take a different approach to that. So they need to consider the benefits that a project can deliver, and particularly look at who might pay for those benefits. So who might pay for the cleaner water or the carbon, for instance. And the process will involve developing financial models, which then present that compelling case to the investors. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that from Dan and Paul later on. And as we saw in the video, that investment will be used to finance the delivery of the project, achieve the benefits, which are then paid for by the organisation that could benefit. So to summarise, you need to identify a service and who benefits from it. You need to be able to define the value of that service, and are there beneficiaries who are prepared to pay for it? And once you've looked at the payment and how much is likely to be paid in, and the regularity and predictability of that, you need to then consider whether those values are greater than your operating costs. So we could look at catchment services, for instance. So, for example, by delivering wetlands or improvements in peatlands, we could expect a water quality impact. And the aspect to consider is, would the water company benefit from reduced costs due to this improved water quality? And if so, will they pay for their reduced costs? How will they pay? And if you can say yes to all those above, then in principle, you have an investment proposition and you have your pitch for the investors. So through NEIRF, we are wanting to achieve the goals, as I said, set out in the 25-year environment plan. And we've listed some of the eligible natural environments that are most likely to contribute on the left. And then on the right, we can see some of the beneficiaries that could benefit from the services provided by these environments. And through the first round of the NERF, we're hoping to be able to share a lot more of the case studies with you on these types of approaches. So in terms of revenue generation, sorry, just lost my mouse and can't move on to the next slide. In terms of revenue generation, there's some examples here. We could be talking about selling carbon credits from woodland creation or peatland restoration, using the existing woodland carbon codes or peatland codes. Under the forthcoming Environment Bill, we could be selling biodiversity units from a habitat bank, for instance, using Defra's offsetting metrics. Or it could be focused around selling catchment services, so improved water quality or natural flood risk management benefits, as we'll hear from Dan. As an organisation, we've also been working with the Green Finance Institute to deliver a series of 4 webinars about that journey to investment readiness. So how you get from your idea to that investment pitch. And these are available to watch on the Green Finance Institute's YouTube channel. And they're also available on our NERF SharePoint site. So these explain in a bit more detail about the fund, and we'll also provide, there's some more case studies on there as well. And I'll share the links with you later on. So in terms of what we're hoping to achieve through this fund, we want to develop and test new approaches to funding, which balance that risk and return, not just for the environment and the owners of the land, but also for the investors. And as I've said, we want to develop that pipeline of investable projects to deliver environmental benefits. The grant is applicable in England only. And what we want to do through the grant is to enable applicants to obtain the support they need from professional advisors to get to that investment case. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And the outcome we're hoping to achieve is to build confidence within the financial sector so that we can kickstart that environmental market and begin to see investment in our environmental projects. Oh, missed a slide, sorry. In terms of who can apply, we're talking about not-for-profit organisations, so including charities and many of the organisations that are already involved in our catchment partnerships. It's open to public sector as well, so that includes local authorities and national parks. And unlike perhaps other grants, it's also available for private businesses that are registered with HMRC. And this could include organisations, sole traders, academic institutions, community benefit companies, for instance. So it's a very broad approach. It's probably easier to focus on the ineligible applicants. So we're talking about central government departments and non-departmental public bodies such as ourselves, Environment Agency. And just to emphasise, one of the outcomes of the fund is to promote the knowledge developed through the delivery of the projects. So we plan to do this through providing additional support to connect the project developers with investors and intermediaries, and share the learning that we're gaining through the pilot studies as well. We want to make sure that the products that are developed through NEIRF are also openly available to others to benefit from. So it's really important to us that the projects that we fund can be replicated elsewhere or scaled up, so that what's developed in one project can be used to support others across the sector as well. And we anticipate this support will evolve over the lifetime of the programme, but we're intending to establish a community of practice once we've announced the successful applicants as well. So I've listed here some of the examples of the activities that are eligible for funding. I won't run through them all, but you can see that it's focusing on the commercial and legal aspects and the financial modelling of the approach. So as I say, it's getting to that investment case. Now, this is taken from the guidance documents for the NERF Fund. So although the first round of applications is closed, the round one application form and guidance is still available on gov.uk. So you're obviously welcome to have a look at that and see the information in there. So I thought it would be helpful as well just to have a quick summary of where we are now. So applications for the first round closed at the end of March, and we're currently in the assessment process, and we anticipate that successful applicants will be announced in July. We're intending that the majority of the grants will be in the region of between 10 and 100k. And as I said, we're hoping to set up the community of practice in the autumn, which will start to build capabilities within the sector, perhaps some bespoke training, and sharing the knowledge developed from the successful projects. And I know there has been talk about launch of round two, and this is dependent on the government's forthcoming spending review. So we are hopeful that we'll be able to launch the second round later on in the autumn, but obviously we can keep you posted through Liz and on that as well. And then finally, before I finish, just in terms of where further information is available. So on gov.uk, you've got the Green Finance Strategy. And as I've just mentioned, there's the application form and guidance from round one. We have a community SharePoint site, which contains much of the information I've mentioned today. If you want access to that, you will need to email us at our inbox there. The email address is at the top. It's irf@environment-agency.gov.uk. And there's also the Green Finance Institute's website, which I mentioned as well, and their YouTube channel, where you can see the webinars called Journey to Investment. So I will stop there because I'm sure you're looking forward to hearing about the case study projects and how they've taken forward a lot of the theory, but obviously they've helped develop the design of the NERF Fund as well. So I will hand you back to Brian. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. And I'm sure that's triggered a number of questions that people will be mulling. So please put your questions in the Q&A box. We'll come back to that shortly. But I'm pleased to introduce Paul Cottington from the Southwest National Farmers Union, who's going to be telling us a bit about the Poole Harbour Nutrient Management Scheme and how that's going. So over to you, Paul. Thank you.
Hey Diddley, I've just realised can I just switch off my bright light above me because it's reflecting just slightly. Hold on 2 seconds.
Okay, we'll have some intermittent music if somebody wants to whistle.
Oh, there. Sorry about that. That's bald fella excuse with shiny headness. Right. Shall I just see if I can find my share of screen and get my PowerPoint? Right. Cool. So, as Alison said, the Poole Harbour Nutrient Management Scheme is one of the 4 projects that has been funded through the kind of pilot phase of all of this, with some funding from ESME, Defra and the Environment Agency. And actually, I'll kind of share a little bit, which I was chatting with our outgoing project manager this morning. And she said one of her kind of reflections on her time with working on this is being fun, which is ridiculous given just the amount of work that needs to go into these innovative type approaches, and just how many, for something that seems very simple, and personally I think what we're trying to do is actually quite simple, there are an awful lot of quite complicated things. And actually, before this the conference webinar started, we were talking about double funding, and if you want to find another complicated areas, you go down the rabbit hole of double funding. Anyway, the reason why she said it was fun was because you get to work with an awful lot of smart and interesting people who are all trying to achieve a greater good. And I think that's really what's defined what we've been trying to do in Poole Harbour. We're a farmer focused and farmer led approach around nutrients, but in order to do that, you can't do it in isolation. You have to do that with the other key partners. And for us, that's the buyers and sellers, or the buyers potentially of developers and the other farmers and water company. But you've also got the regulator, so you've got the Environment Agency and you've got Natural England, and in amongst a bunch of other folk. And so it's something where having a passion for working together, I think, is really important. So anyway, the picture here is one of Poole Harbour. And if you're sharp-eyed, you might be able to see that kind of, you've got a little island in the middle there. And Poole Harbour, I think, is one of the largest natural harbours in the world. If you're keen-eyed, you might see that there's a little bit of green in there. Yeah, and that green is algae. And that algae is fed partly from some of the waters coming in from the sea, but in a majority it's coming from off the land. And I think it's about, I don't know, maybe 10-20% is coming from the sea, 80% is coming from the land. And of that land amount, there's a proportion which comes from atmospheric deposition of nitrates. There is a proportion that comes from water companies, a proportion that comes from agriculture. And what we're trying to do is deal with the agricultural side of things. So, and I'm not sure I quite said there. So the issue is algae. Algae is fed by nitrates, also sunshine. We can't pray for having no sunshine. We can't do anything about that, but we can do something about the nitrates. And it's a nitrate driven issue. I put up this bit, I put it as structure and support, but really it's drivers. And this applies to anywhere and everywhere, give or take. And I put it a farm business, but it could be for a catchment or something. And what it is about is, what is the imperative driver to get something going? And, for me, there are 3 key reasons why you would have an action or a driver to get going. One might be personal and cultural goals, it could be your ethical belief system or whatever else, and the information that came to fuel all of that. Could be purely financial, saving money, making money, or it could be regulation and contract. So it could be the law tells you to do it or your contract tells you to do it. And for what we're doing, our imperative driver is around what's known as the judicial review around the water protection zones and the potential threat for having a water protection zone. And so what we're doing is taking a voluntary actions in order to prevent having a regulation being brought in and having a pretty drastic impact on how agriculture will operate across this whole catchment. This bar graph is the reason why we've come up with a nutrient trading scheme, and it shows relative amounts for agriculture of nitrates from different sectors, shown as well, each green bar represents how much in kilos nitrate is coming off per hectare. So the average for a pig farm is 67 kilos per hectare. And if you go all the way across to the right, you'll see the average for the whole catchment is 27 kilos per hectare. The requirement for Poole Harbour to get to a favourable status, so sorry, one of the things I didn't say was Poole Harbour is a special protection area for its wildfowl. To get rid of the algae, to reduce the amount of nitrates feeding the algae, and to get this harbour back into a favourable status, will mean agriculture has to drop its nutrient nitrate loading from an average of 27 kilos or so to about 18. And what we did was we looked at this and went, okay, one, that's going to have a pretty drastic impact on a number of sectors. So dairy, poultry and pig will, find that pretty difficult, as will a lot of the others. But actually, you could have a relationship built between lowland livestock and, say, a dairy farm, and a few lowland livestock could support a dairy farm to get there. Hence the idea of doing some offsetting between farms. And that's its most simple idea for all of this. So this is the catchment itself. It's about 800 kilometres square, 500 or so farm holdings. You've got Poole Harbour over on the right, and around that you've obviously got the city of Poole, and there's a pressure for development there. So that's one potential place for doing some offsetting, although there are some extreme complications with how one does this with the law, but hey. We've also got, so you've got farms, you've got developers, and you've also got water companies. So you've got Wessex Water, and Wessex Water has treatment works over in the Poole area, but also it's got a requirement to reduce its phosphate loading by quite a considerable amount. So it has some choices there, which are around, one, potentially doing it through changing their kind of concrete works within the treatment works itself, which is very high, or potentially doing some offsetting with farmers. So there's a relationship there to be had with the farmers. So Poole Harbour Nutrient Management Scheme, the kind of quick sell for all of this is a whole catchment approach that brings together all the farmers in the Poole Harbour catchment under one entity. It will provide the tools and support for reducing nitrates and delivering additional environmental benefits for agriculture and other sectors, especially the water company and new development. The scheme has a vision. The farmers in the Poole Harbour catchments are the most nitrogen efficient in the world. So we have some aims within all of this. First is laser focus on the fact that the point of this is to deal with favourable status for the special protection area, looking at new markets for nutrient trading, working within existing regulations. I'll go through that in a second, being flexible, phased, blah, blah, blah. Crucial thing is down the bottom there is farmer owned and controlled. So we have a board of a group of farmers who have been driving this forward, and we've taken about 3 years to get to this point, just under. And the whole point is that we create something that works for the farmers here. This I'll just put in briefly and describe briefly is essentially the glide path for what we've got to do. So down the bottom right, that small blue bar, which is 2030, and there's so bottom of this is the blue bit is time and going from 2020 to 2030, and on the y-axis you've got the leached nitrogen kilograms per hectare. Eventually farming has got to get down to about 18 kilos, and what we're looking to do is work with the Environment Agency and Natural England to be in an approved scheme where farmers can have a glide path to get there. So they stepped each year will have basically the tap will be slightly tightened. Okay, so this year the target would be around 28 or so, and then slowly it will decrease. I think it's by, well, it is by 6% each year. So that's what we're working to. Is the whole point is that nitrates will decrease over time. And so we've got 5 key aspects to what we're doing. Operation and management of a farmer-owned controlled entity. So we're pretty much in the final stages of creating a KIC, which Alison was talking about, you know, legal entities and things that these things operate under. Development of catchment-wide governance, which we pretty much got. Nutrient accounting tool, development of a farm level nutrients accounting tool. We are currently out to contract with University of Hertfordshire to look at all of the tools pretty much globally, and see how they are faring for different users. And different users for us are crucially the farmers. So how do they interact with a nutrient accounting tool? The regulators, so would the regulator accept what the values are that come out of it? How will the buyers want to get information out of it? And how could a third party operate it? And I'll explain a little bit more about nutrient accounting tool in a second. Development of a nutrient trading tool. And actually we're testing some of this at the moment in a trial we're running with 20 farmers and looking at, well, how do we need to do this? And essentially what volumes we're working with. And there's a 5th part down here, which, even though I stated our laser focus is around nitrates, all of this, if you're doing things on nitrates, you're going to be doing things on phosphates, and you're doing things on nitrates and phosphates, you're definitely doing things on carbon. So if you're doing things for one part, then potentially you can access new markets. And so what we're hoping is that we can use that as our, you know, the fact that we're aggregating farmers, we're bringing farmers together, and I'll show you this in a second, means we can get into new markets too. So the way the system works, and hopefully this will make some sense, is you have a farmer. That farmer is part of a farmer group. For us, it's called Poole Harbour Agriculture Group. That agriculture group, the farmer group, sits as part of a partner group. So it's what we call a system operator. We've got the buyers and sellers, and you've got the regulators there. So you've got the water companies, developers, Natural Environment, Natural England, and the Environment Agency. And we also have the catchment partnership in there as well to represent out to the wider catchment. There is a target set. I mean, the target is not set by the partner group per se. Is set within what is called a consent order. So that glide path thing that you saw just now. We have the target is applied to the different key impactors of nitrates. The water company essentially has to be nutrient neutral. Sorry, the developers have to be nutrient neutral. The water company is given a target within the consent order, and the farmers are given a target. And what the farmer will do, will put all of their information into an accounting tool, which would be, as I said, we're looking at the moment. So essentially they'll put in their stocking rates, how they're meeting crop requirements on different fields, what different mitigations they might use. So whether or not they put cover crops and things like this, and all they do is fertilizer spreader calibration. And that will produce a value. And then potentially they're either above or below the target. And if they're below it, then they can potentially sell. And if they're above it, they can potentially buy. And so there are potential users of, well, buyers of, one, the farmer, but you've also got the water company and potentially developers. I've got this slide here, and I will go through it briefly, but it's it tries to show the relationship between what we're doing in terms of meeting a target for a special protection area, so a designated area, highest designation you can get, which for us, the end target for favourable is in the middle there, say, of purple, which is 18 kilos. And how you do that within the context of existing regulations. So this diagram shows that at the top, that's where your high nutrient leaching or high nitrate leaching, and at the bottom is low nutrient leaching. all farmers are required to meet existing regulations. So you can't go and trade your way out of NVZs and things like that. So there is a requirement to do self-assessment. Farmers have to state that they are, doing all their records, and we would have to check that any tool is not cheating it, so the farmer is able to, essentially kind of do some sort of a fudge around what it is to do NVZs or something like that. So there's a requirement there to meet existing regulations. And I put on the side, right-hand side, farmer A is over the target. So this little dotted line at the top here is farmer A over the target, isn't compliant, can't buy credits or trade. The next part, this kind of pinky color, is where the farmer is still below the target, but isn't required to use any particular measures in order to get to target. And this is essentially what water companies and stuff are doing in order to offset with farms to get to their target. So when you're in this area, you can potentially buy credits in order to get to your target level. And this, as I said, is what water companies will do. They have to meet their existing regulations, but then they can go to other places in order to balance out. If you're in the middle, you're obviously all balanced up, you've got nothing to buy or sell. And then someone who is in the blue down the bottom there is obviously in a position where they can sell something. We've done a whole load of farmer engagement, and one of the things I'll point out is this stuff takes time. So it took us an awful lot of time to get funding in place. We got the funding at the beginning of last year. I think it was probably about March time, pretty much exactly the same time as lockdown occurred. So we then put a pause on everything for a good few months in order to just try and work out how we're all going to, kind of exist in that, well, in our current new world, I suppose. And then we employed a project manager October last year. However, back in 2019, we went round and we did a bunch of meetings with the farmers in the area, and what we found was pretty much 99% support for having a farmer-led approach as an alternative to a water protection zone, with a bunch of kind of caveats around it. And what you're seeing here in that kind of, with the red bit, the outline shows where the catchment is, and the kind of pinky purpley bit is all of the land that signed up, and it's about 75% of the agricultural land. So we had a very good take up in terms of what it is to want to go forward with this. We got a bunch of phases. So current phase is about what Alison was saying and what the NEIRF is all about, which is investment readiness. So we've actually employed Trolldus Bank, and so they are looking at our business models, and they're speaking with ourselves, the farmers, with the developers and the water companies, and looking at different ways in which revenue can or investment can come in. So that will be everything from how we do subscription services to, where can private investment come in to pay for a measure on the ground, and the farmer get that funding come in, and then get a return in terms of nitrate saving or something like that, and potentially an income from that, and also pay the investor back. We're then moving into a pilot phase, which I expect we're doing probably October or so this year, and then it's rolling out and establishing itself. So there are a number of benefits to doing this. One, we're reducing nitrates, but also, as I said, if you're doing this, you're also reducing other pollutants, you're reducing carbon, there's a change to land management. There's a massively important part, which is we're able to support some of the extremely good businesses that are existing in the area already. So, we got some big dairies, which potentially might not be able to meet some of these targets, but already meet existing regulations. So they will be able to maintain their businesses and get somewhere else, another farm, to be able to offset and keep them going. We'll obviously get things like improved soil management, and I put down the bottom, focus on best practice. And it kind of goes back to our vision. It's about being the best you can at doing nutrients. Just flick through those top bits. They were the options that we had. So, we could choose to do nothing. We could, wait for a water protection zone, blah, blah, blah. Right. We have got a number of risks and obstacles. And I suppose one of the risks is, as simple as these things are, certainly in my head, there is an awful lot of stuff that has to be worked out, and you know, we're at a time when agriculture and everything is really in flux. But risk regulatory positions, so how laws are being interpreted by the government, compressed timeline, we got not a lot of time to do all of this, funding window, so we still have to get in all of the funding in order to put all of this through. We've obviously got to get, you know, the crucial bit is getting all the farmers involved in all of this, so making sure that the benefits are right and the threats are real and significant enough that actually it makes it worthwhile. And I would say that we have got in the background for what we do, and it's super helpful for us, is we've got a red lines and key principles document, which is written by and for the farmers to just check, are we still doing the right thing? Yeah, is that okay? And obviously we've got to do things like monitoring and verification. So hopefully that is a canter through what is our scheme.
Thank you, Paul. Quite a lot of detail in there, which I hope will provoke some interesting questions. And thanks, Alison, for your earlier presentation too. And I'm not really sure how we're doing in terms of questions coming in. If you want to let us know, or if there's anything that either Alison or Paul can address, that'd be good. But yeah, Paul, I've got a question really. Sorry, just before you do that, just sorry, because I don't think there's much in the cupboard there. Just about the, if you like, the shifts and the, you know, if the mechanisms to get people to reduce the nutrient input. So the input dependency is obviously one of the big goals to achieve. Is there much sort of a move to sort of agroecological practices as a result of this, or is it just is that still seen as perhaps being a little bit left field?
To what? Sorry. Okay, so in terms of all of our focus so far has been really around getting the right mechanisms and governance in place for all of this. Yeah, so you've got to have the right structure. It's interesting, when we've been out to speak to we've got 20 farmers, as I said, who are part of the trial. Their interest has been what will be the impact for them. So knowing what score their farmers at and where they are in relation to the target. The next bit that everyone talks about is the practices they can adopt on the farm. And it's really interesting. Everyone, after our second presentation, so we went through, we got a sequence of presentations as part of the trial and engagement. And the second one was around compliance and nutrient accounting tools. Anyway, it turns out within 2 days, a bunch of farm discussion groups were talking about what they can do on farm to reduce. So it's everything from putting in practice, you know, kind of cover crops to how do you do overwintering and, you know, kind of grazing onto turnips or, yeah, a variety of different things. So the farmers are focused on practical measures. A difficulty is the nutrient accounting tools don't necessarily account for everything a farmer does on their farm. They tend to take the bigger, easier stuff with what they you know, what they say has got good efficacy with it. Oh, you're on mute.
I am indeed. Sorry, somebody had to do it. Anne, do you want to come in with anything you've got that's appeared from the Q&A?
Yeah, so we've got some questions coming in. I think it's really interesting presentation, Paul, and I think there's a lot of complex stuff in there. And I guess for our purposes in terms of the facilitation groups, I've got some questions as well, but I'll go to what's in the Q&A. So we've had one from Danielle Anderson Walker. Are all farmers in the area engaging? And I think you've sort of touched on this, or have some decided not to take part? If so, what are the reasons?
So to be straight, we're at the beginning of all this process. So we did, so we've got probably about 540 farm holdings in total. We engaged with about 130 or so different farms, which will include more than one holding. And of those farms, 99% expressed an interest in being involved in it. Yeah, so we had a high level of engagement with it. We haven't gone to the stage where where we're trading within all of this, so we will see what that looks like. And our next bits is to basically fold the membership, so to open up membership. And I expect the ways farmers will interact on this will be different according to their farming position. So a high intensity farm, which is well above the glide path, which is very concerned about having a regulation brought in, is going to have a different reaction to a low intensity farm, which is well below and things, meh, bring in a regulation. So what we've got to do is just make sure we get the right balance of the benefits in terms of what it is to come in there. What is really interesting though is we have worked, as I said, this is, you know, we've got a farmer group that runs with all of this, is, and also then going to the trial group and just in general conversation and catchment, is farmers in general are just really proud of the stuff they do, you know, so they're really proud of the existing measures that they're putting in, doing cover crops, working with caption sensitive farming and stuff. So actually what we've got to do is provide opportunity to be involved at whatever level, because people want to show, in general, farmers want to show that they're trying to do their best within a suite of very difficult regulations and trading.
No, thanks for that. I guess this is sort of related to that, and that kind of proudness, but in the opposite way in some respects. So again, another question here: if only 75% of the farmers have committed to this project, what will happen to the other 25%? Seems unfair that they will get away with not reducing their nitrates into the harbour. Yeah,
so what we've got is we've got a requirement to sort this out by 2024. Yeah, we've got to show direction of travel by 2024. And so we've set that, you know, we would look to get everyone into the scheme. It's 75% of the land area that was included at that point. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be a slow process, and taking people on a journey. And, you know, there will be some first things which are the crucial things you have to do in all of this is, one, we've got to be looking to reduce nitrates. We've got to do this effectively in efficiency and keep existing businesses there. But the crucial kind of steps in all of this are, one, farmers to sign up and go, hey, we're here. Two, to actually do some work around their compliance. And then three is actually just to get a baseline for their farm. You know, as important as anything else is just to know where you are as a farm in the scheme of things. And it's after that, it's about then going to, are you meeting your glide path? So it's a slow journey within all of this, but an awful lot of it we're also looking to develop how we work with the supply chain. So, you know, helping that to get everyone to move along with it. So I think the answer to all of this is it will be a journey, but, you know, it's something, I mean, if it hopefully is successful, because if not, the alternatives seem pretty unfavorable to farmers. So, you know, it's up to people, you know, it's up to us to create a choice, and the choice that's currently given. So within the consent order, this EA Natural England document, you can either be part of an approved scheme, which is what we're creating, or you sit outside of it, in which case you would get a visit from the Environment Agency, and instead of be working to a glide path target, you would be immediately assessed against the 18 kilograms target. And if you weren't hitting that, you would technically be polluting under the environmental permitting regs and could be going through some enforcement. So the Environment Agency also has a role as a regulator to do things. We have a role to create an approved scheme that works for farmers to take a better journey to getting to good. And all of this will take time in terms of how you communicate it out. Plus also different farms will hear information in different ways and need it in different ways. And so we're going to have to communicate like that. Brian.
Thanks, Paul. I think there's a couple of questions that popped up, Paul. We'll have to come back to you on them, and we'll provide the answers as part of the feedback from this. But thank you very much. It's been really, really good to hear that detail and see the progress around Poole Harbour. Thanks also to Alison, and yeah, and good luck, Paul, with your move to your next meeting. Hopefully that goes okay. Moving on, if that's okay, we have now got Dan Turner from Well, where are you from, Dan? The Rivers Trust in the Wyre Valley is what I've got down here. So if you're ready to give you a presentation, I'll pass over to you. So thanks.
Oh, thank you very much. Can everybody see that? Is that turning up all right?
Yeah, good stuff.
Yep, cool. Brilliant. All right. Well, hi, I'm Dan from the Rivers Trust, and thanks for inviting me here today to talk to you about the Wyre NFM Investment Readiness Project. For those that don't know about the Rivers Trust, we are one of the fastest growing NGOs in the UK, and probably the largest grassroots organisation in Europe, solely focusing on protecting rivers and catchments for the benefit of people and wildlife. And we are the umbrella body for 64 member Rivers Trusts across the UK and Ireland. A bit about me, I joined the Rivers Trust about 18 months ago. I formerly worked for one of the local Rivers Trusts, the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust, where I actually did, as Brian mentioned before, ran a facilitation group in Wharfdale. And I actually grew up on a large commercial mixed farm in Cumbria. So today I'm going to talk to you about catchment markets, private investment and alternative financing mechanisms. The majority of my presentation, I'm going to be talking about the kind of the Wyre NFM Investment Readiness Project, but I'm going to just quickly start by kind of setting the scene and explain why we are at the Rivers Trust exploring commercial opportunities like this. So why is there a need to explore alternative financing mechanisms? Well, Alison touched on this kind of at the start. As you all are aware, we are amidst a climate and biodiversity crisis and already living with the effects from shifting seasons to more persistent extreme weather events. To mitigate the effects of climate change and tackle our biodiversity crisis, we've got to act now. However, one of the biggest obstacles to delivering nature recovery at scale and at pace that is required is the mechanisms in which we finance this. We are not going to meet, our future ambitions solely through philanthropic giving and granting aid, and we must look at alternative mechanisms. So essentially, this project is all about how we're looking at how we can accelerate the movement of money into nature conservation at the scale and pace which is, desperately required. I'm going to talk to you about the Wyre NFM Investment Readiness Project. This project is working in partnership with United Utilities, Floodery, Co-op Insurance, Environment Agency, with funding from Esme Fairbairn Foundation, and Trodus Bank are there as our financial advisors, and we're working very closely with the local Rivers Trust in that area, the Wyre Rivers Trust. And we're also working in partnership with the Woodland Trust. As I said, we've been working with Trodus Bank and kind of taking lessons learned from the kind of social sector. And what I'm going to talk to you today is around a kind of a debt-based model. So this project, as Paul mentioned before, is one of the 4 pilot projects funded by Defra, EA and Esme Fairbairn Foundation. We are specifically looking at around natural flood management. Moors the Future are looking at kind of peatland and carbon. Devon Wildlife Trust are looking at kind of ecotourism, and you've just heard from Paul. And the idea is to plan, test, learn, and replicate and scale. And it aligns with a lot of governmental objectives. So just to kind of re-emphasize, climate change could increase annual cost of flooding in the UK almost 15-fold by 2080s under new high emission scenarios. So that is one of the big drivers. We know that hard engineered flood risk management solutions alone will not address our future flood risk challenges and must be supplemented with nature-based solutions. But again, mechanisms to finance the implementation of NFM at scale still remain one of the biggest barriers to uptake. So we're talking about the Wyre catchment. The Wyre is in Lancashire, and there is a flood affected community in the Wyre called Churchtown who have experienced a 1 in 50 year flood event 4 times in the last 20 years. And this had devastating impacts on the local community, but also the economic cost alone just to insurance is just shy of £2 million. So right at the start of the project, we had some hydrological NFM modelling done, which looked at where we could, best place NFM features in the catchment to have the greatest impact of downstream flooding. And it highlighted that around 70 hectares of NFM interventions could reduce flooding to around 56 properties in a 1 in 50-year flood event. These interventions are all, really well recognised, such things as leaky dams, hedges, low-level earth bunds, ponds, and scrapes and river restoration, which all have the ability to store, slow, and intercept water. But as we all know, natural flood management also has the ability to deliver a lot of other ecosystem services. So not only does it, help to reduce flood risk, but it also creates habitat. We also, it's great at kind of improving water quality and also sequestering carbon through, the large amount of tree planting that we're doing as well. But it also has a huge opportunity and the ability to, engage local communities to help and enable local communities to understand their flood risk better and, kind of alleviate some of those stresses and strains associated with the devastating impact of flooding. So, so the real challenge in this project is how do we bring together all these various stakeholders through a revenue model? And here I'm just going to talk to you about a simple kind of transactional structure that we've created, and this underpins this project. And this can seem pretty complex, but how I like to think about it is if you just think about it like any other startup company that doesn't have enough money to get going, and so they raise investment and then pay that investment over time by selling their product. And our product happens to be ecosystem services. So right at the heart of this is something that we call a special purpose vehicle, which will draw down external finance investment to fund the capital delivery, which will be repaid over a 9-year period through contracts with buyers. So those that will benefit from reduction in flood peaks. So that could be your water company that have assets in the catchment, that could be the local council, or it could be in the insurance sector. And then contracts with sellers, so farmers and landowners who are going to host those NFM interventions on the ground. But essentially, this is a social enterprise model. The catchment is driving the change, and the SPV will be set up as a community interest company limited by guarantee, and that will have an asset lock on it. So if there is any retained profit in that entity, any of those profits has to be spent on either community projects or further enhancing natural flood management in the catchment. So I think some of the key kind of issues with this project is I think is meeting the needs of stakeholders, but specifically farmers and landowners, looking at how can we diversify kind of income streams, looking at locally targeted interventions, and it's also locally owned. This special purpose vehicle is the local community is kind of right at the heart of that. And we're ensuring that we deliver wider benefits beyond just natural flood management, but also all of those other things that I mentioned previously. So I just thought I'd run through the story so far to kind of set the scene, really. So we've established a modelling working group. We've had additional kind of modelling done and academic review of that model, so we can all feel comfortable with the model output. So we're all happy with those. What that model is saying. We've obviously done a lot of work around developing that commercial structure. So as I said, we've gone along the line of a community interest company. There is other options out there like Bencoms or other kind of structures, but we decided this is the best fit for us. We've had to develop a financial model. So, calculate how much all of these capital interventions is going to cost, how much we're going to have to pay the farmers, and then try and bring together the buyers to help pay for that. And we've also created an ability for everybody to interact with the project. So we've created a dashboard where, farmers, buyers, local community and investors can all kind of look about what's happening in the catchment. So there'll be time-lapse cameras and, up-to-date kind of storage volumes in the catchment, etc. Another, and this has probably been the largest part of the project, is the buyers work stream, and this is, you know, identifying those buyers that might be interested in buying some of these services. So we've actually, in this case, we pulled together 6 buyers. So Floodry, which is the reinsurance company for the government, which was set up post 2015 floods to ensure that everybody has access to kind of affordable flood risk insurance. United Utilities, which is the water company in the area, the Wire Council, the Woodland Trust from the trees perspective, the Environment Agency, and the Northwest Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. And each one of these, you know, buyers is coming to the table for slightly different things and have their own unique kind of contract, basically. And we are now just about at the position of going to signed MOUs that will then develop into legal contracts. So we have managed to secure enough money to make this model work. And then the other, you know, really important part of this is the farmers and the sellers of ecosystem services. So what we've done is, you know, developed a payment structure that really incentivise farmers to get on board and adopt some of these solutions. So they will include, you know, a capital payment, a revenue payment, something similar to what they might expect under countryside stewardship, and a maintenance payment. And that is really, really important, is that these things are properly maintained so they're functioning. And that's something that sometimes, you know, isn't funded in traditional grant in aid for natural flood management. So this is actually going to be a 9-year contract, but we're looking at, you know, mechanisms to extend that to 20 years and then from 20 to 50 years as well. So, you know, I just thought, you know, I'll just highlight some of the challenges that we faced in this project. So how do we deliver, you know, a catchment scale place-based NFM project? These are modeled outputs. So it's not like the farmers can exactly choose to the nth degree what, you know, interventions they have on the land. It's all been modeled. You know, metrics and validation of ecosystem services are, you know, very, very early on in their development. We've come to, you know, with the buyers, most of them have come kind of through a cost avoided model, but how do, you know, that's been challenging to really understand their kind of their business case of that and really delve into about where those cost savings are and understand, you know, how that might work for them. Another big one is like kind of risk sharing and fair share. So we've taken a very much an open book approach with this project, and yeah, so you know, it's just sharing that risk really with the buyers, the investors as well. How does this integrate with, you know, environmental land management schemes and existing countryside stewardship, etc. And we've also, you know, we've gone with the income forgone kind of calculation with some of those payments. That's not the best payments, and ideally we'd love to move towards more of a results based mechanism. And just finally, some of those opportunities. You know, despite the challenges, the project has created a huge amount of opportunity. I think one of the main opportunities is how do we engage with farmers and landowners to enable them to take a different approach. You know, we've got to change that narrative from the environment is just something that farmers feel they have to do to get money. This has got to be a fundamental part of your business, you know, for the long-term sustainability. And there's also, you know, a really key aspect for us is how do we diversify those buyers? So we've got other revenue streams coming into this. And yeah, I mean, I could go on about all the other opportunities, but I think that kind of nicely wraps up really. So
great stuff, Dan. Thank you very much. And sorry for having to squeeze you on time there. I'm going to invite Jenny to pop up now and do her presentation, and then it'll give us a few minutes towards the end for questions and any discussion that might come up. And just to make the point that please keep logging your questions on the Q&A. Anything we can't answer today, we'll provide an answer by way of feedback. So Jenny, are you ready? Nearly there. Here we go. Okay, over to you, Jenny. Thank you very much. And if you can unmute, that'd be good too.
unmute. Thank you ever so much. Sorry, hopefully you can see my screen and hear me now. Thank you. What I was going to try and do today after those presentations was to try and take a farmer's view about and hopefully advisor's view about what we're experiencing out in the real world at the moment, which is where there is just so much confusion from the farmers about those opportunities that have been so well highlighted. And I think that it's a really confusing time for farmers, as Paul said and everyone said, that there's opportunities, but there's also lots of different things coming forward. And I've just literally typed up some of the funding streams that we know that we're already facilitating and that we're already hearing they're going to be opportunities for farmers to be able to be able to carry on exploring, but we want to make sure that those are done in a way that they understand those opportunities and risks going forward. Hopefully you can see my next screen now. So what I've been trying to do is to sort of give a sort of simple way that we might be able to start to think about these opportunities, so that a local facilitator or advisor who's advising farmer groups can start to unpick their local opportunities and show you how that might actually happen. And obviously we're in this extraordinary period of transition where some of these mechanisms are already there and being trialled brilliantly, as you've seen already. Some of them are still in development, some of them are existing but are changing, and there's all sorts of opportunities unlocking as we go forward. So I'm going to go through this sort of 7 different layers to show you how we think that there's some real recommendations that you could put forward in this challenging and uncertain world. So I think our starting point is, really there's a lot of information now about how the benefits of spatially contextualizing your land, or the land that you're looking at as facilitators or farmer groups, that we've got a huge amount of data and there's a huge amount of opportunities for multiple delivery that we talked about. And actually that we can do that with comprehensive GIS systems. And obviously we've got Magic, but there's lots of different apps and tools. But how do we work out whether we're doing something well for one of those public goods or ecosystem services isn't interacting with others and making a benefit in other ways that we don't know? So we're aware that actually a lot of the counties are now going to be commissioning or have already commissioned through local nature partnerships, nature recovery networks, which might move forward to our local nature recovery strategies, and that we need to align the opportunities for farmers and land managers to be able to deliver ecosystem services on these public goods, so that they can actually have an opportunity for blended finance that actually is able to be stacked and layered, and obviously that how their land might be rewarded for delivering those multiple benefits. So one of the things that we've been promoting through our ELMS trial, which seems to be really hopefully now sort of being adopted quite well, and as others also obviously have suggested, is that having a unified mapping system by which we can actually build that opportunity for blended finance through UK habitat classification, which is the habitat classification that Defra already uses for the biodiversity metric, is a real starting point for us to be able to blend finance, because we can actually attribute the function of the land under one simple classification system, and we can integrate all of the different ways we used to map land into that habitat mapping system. And as you say, it's very simple, it's hierarchical, and I'm not going to go into great detail, but why I think it's essential in our going forward is that as we're able to start to look at data and analyze data in a very efficient form, that we can actually not only look at the way that our land what habitat type we have on our land through those 8 different classification systems, but we can also attribute management to that land, which we can then attribute the ecosystem service function for which we might want to be rewarded and have blended finance. So we've learned over a long period of time, the ecosystem Defra pilots were done in 2013. We know we can attribute functionality to different habitat types. We know that it's possible for that to be disseminated so that we can actually have different functions delivered from the same piece of land. And that is a key thing that we need government to support us on, is how we can co-locate blended finance to be able to build those opportunities that I was mentioning earlier on. So in our ELM trial, what we've been trying to show is that there's a real opportunity to have natural capital maps that are brought together in this unified form of UK habitat mapping. We can start to aggregate farmers across landscapes to look for ecosystem delivery, but also ecosystem service gaps. we can use that data to start to help us understand how we can work around communities and groups of parishes along water bodies to look at how we can provide food, water, flood mitigation, water quality, biodiversity recovery, carbon capture. And that the aim is that we can build resilient, regenerative land use that provides food, but also delivers also those services. And for the farmers at the moment, there's this enormous sort of like, oh my goodness, you know, how do we go through all these different brilliant opportunities? How do we make that relevant to us where we are in our locality? How do we get those opportunities to understand how we might get involved in some of these projects? So at the moment, the vehicle that we have for that obviously is countryside stewardship. And there's a lot of confusion, and I would say farmers are really inquiring now as to what do they do next? What do they do now with BPS loss? What is the next step they can take towards understanding not only these new opportunities, but how can they take those steps with the existing opportunities? And on the Elms engagement group, we're sort of constantly saying, you know, we do need more clarity. We do need the farmers to be able to make business decisions that can help them in these transitions. And we've certainly got farmers not knowing whether they should carry on with higher tier, should they go into mid-tier, should they do a wildlife offer as a starting point to build that regenerative baseline, so they might end up being able to trade on some of these other mechanisms and help deliver water quality, nutrient balancing, carbon offsets. And they're wondering, you know, with elm design, what is that going to look like? And there's a sort of merging at the moment between this future of farming and elm design that is becoming very confusing. Farmers don't know whether if they go into a sustainable farm incentive pilot, will that exclude them from other opportunities? You know, are they going to go into the wider landscape recovery pilots? Should they go into any of these things, or should they just look at private investment, as we've been talking about? And how do we as advisors help them facilitate those the best solutions for their farms? But what we have really found is that the more farmers aggregate together, the better that they are in building that resilience for their future in their farm businesses. And we really want the government to now start to say, we need the detail of how we can legally blend finance, how we can set standards, how we can stack and actually enable the integration of funding for natural capital investment. So part of the work that we've been doing is being sort of basically saying that, you know, we must have realised this opportunity of collaboration. Obviously, Brian's sort of like been brilliant about bringing farmer facilitator groups together. And now really there should be everywhere, because there is so much opportunity for groups to deliver for all the things that you've heard about this morning. And that really is only really realised when farmers can work together with their businesses across landscapes, particularly to manage water and soil and all the other things that we talked about. And again, this growing market around the opportunity to sell those private services for different collaborative opportunities for private sector to collaborate with groups of farmers as well. So we know that's coming on board, but we don't know yet how those might interface with the existing and future schemes. We know there's really successful examples of how farmers can offer their land and offer interventions on their land, and how that actually that there's those relationships that are best built. But there's other ways that they can actually access funding and resource as part of those as well. So one of the things that the layers, I suppose, is to say that I think that should not get forgotten, is that there is a huge resource of people that want to go out into the countryside and help in these interventions. We've had in this winter over 60,000 trees and hedges planted and ponds restored, like many, from hundreds of volunteers. And we need to make sure that when we're blending finance, that we include the opportunities of just people getting out and doing those interventions. And obviously there are markets around those developing as well, and social prescribing and all the other opportunities. We're already delivering for biodiversity net gain, creating the opportunities for ponds, for red-crested newts, and we know that this whole market around biodiversity net gain is going to come forward in lots of different other habitats and lots of other different protected species. I mean, we don't quite know how yet that's going to interface with our existing schemes, other opportunities around carbon and all those different mechanisms we've talked about already. And as just been touched on by Dan, you know, there's huge opportunities for farmers to deliver for natural flood management. And with that, effectively, I mean, in our catchment alone, there's £800 million from our Regional Flood and Coastal Committee that wants to look at nature-based solutions as part of that investment in going forward. So I think farmers are in a strong position, but it's still, we need that understanding as to how these opportunities can all come together and enable that co-investment, and that ELM design doesn't start to displace some of those opportunities, and that actually enables that investment to take place to maximise the opportunity. So carbon, obviously we've talked a bit about carbon through the series of this webinar, and actually it's the one that everybody seems to be talking about, gets very excited about, because of the huge amount of money that there is wanting to invest in carbon offsets. We want to be able to get that carbon, payments for the soil. If we build organic matter, we're going to deliver a lot of these benefits. And how is that going to sit and fit within ELM, within all these other projects? And it's actually really important, I think, for us to facilitate what is locally appropriate for our farmer groups and our farmer, our farmers' ambitions, and how they can actually look at how that might work going forward. And obviously, you've had a really good presentation this morning about green finance and agri-tech, how that fits within that whole framework of opportunity. So just to clarify some of the work that we've been doing with the Sustainable Food Trust and the Global Farm Metric, that I think what we're aiming to do with some of the work that we've been working on, trying to attribute function to the land with the support of Rothamsted and the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and looking at how you can standardise data and create that evidence around what the land is delivering based on science, that we should be able to disseminate the functionality of the land into these different areas so that we can legally and understandably verify the functionality, so that the investment can be actually aligned, so that we don't actually displace one by having another, and that there are opportunities for that blended finance and co-location. So just to sort of finish up, I suppose, well, there's a few more slides in the discussion, but I think it's around what I feel is really important for farmers at the moment is that we need to understand that they're having to make big choices, big decisions based around very complicated information and opportunity, but also very little information from the government about what they will actually be supporting. That we know that our local authorities, our local enterprise partnerships, our local nature partnerships, our catchment partnerships, are all trying to align their strategic priorities within a local area. They're trying to lever in private investment, as we've heard. And actually, for farmers, there is a real role for us as advisors to try and give them the opportunities, because it might be that they could get something funded on their farm from multiple different sources, but there might be different caveats with that. So, a long-term conservation covenant might be holding the land, for 30, 50 years. An agri-environment scheme might pay for something in a 5-year programme, but it might require a lot of accountability and attention to detail. A water company may pay for something, and it actually might have more flexibility. And actually, so us as advisors have the role to actually go to the farmer and say, well, these are the options in your local area. This is where you can actually look at the suite of organisations that are wanting you to do interventions on your land, and actually facilitate how the best we can to try and make them enabled to make the appropriate choices for their land within their locality and within the structure of the local authority and district and county in which they live. So just to finish off, there is a structure to this. There is an opportunity to be able to align this through a county-based environmental trust, like they do in Oxfordshire, linked to local nature partnerships, to aggregate funding. We need to make sure we've got the legality. And just to give my sort of current recommendations before we finish, because I think Brian's going to start telling me to stop in a minute, is that I'm just quite worried about the fact that there's now people trying to make farmers spend a lot of money on natural capital mapping, and we don't actually need to do that, because we can translate from existing data into UK habitat maps. So I would say, NGOs will probably help you with that, so don't go spending huge amounts of money. It's really important to get independent trusted advice as a farmer, I think, at the moment through this transition, so that you can get that independent opportunity for funding and blended finance. join together in groups. We've said this. It was lovely to hear Susan from the CLA saying she thinks there now should be 2,000 farmer groups across the country. And if you are approached by people wanting to trade carbon or biodiversity offsetting, just ask them the question how much the broker is taking, because we found that there's lots of people popping up all over the place wanting to sell biodiversity offsets or carbon. And there are some, I think there's an ethical amount that a broker should take, and that's obviously a personal choice. But build that baseline, get those organic matter samples, and actually start to understand, as was said earlier by Paul, about the nutrient balance, the way your farm is running or the farmers that you're involved with are running. But look at those amazing opportunities in regenerative agriculture to actually help us relocalize, be inspired to get, make your own local solutions for local markets, for community supported agriculture, for growing, for soil building, for helping local flooding, all those sort of things. There's some really inspirational things out there that we could be doing, aside of waiting to work out what's going to fund us. And there is local funding for lots of different opportunities that might deliver against climate emergencies from local authorities and local trusts. So my final slide is really just to say, I think there's a huge opportunity. Blended finance is definitely out there. It's complicated. It's not legally worked out exactly how it's going to work yet. Everybody is pushing for that. There is discussions, as Brian was saying to us earlier, within government, we know that they're trying to work out how to do this. But in the meantime, there are huge local opportunities to be realised in the context of where you live and your community and the farmers around you. And so really realise those would be my biggest recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, and action-packed and very informative. So lots of detail there, and I think just given the issues and the complexity, that this is going to be an issue that we'll have to come back to and address in further detail as we go on. There will be a further webinar that will touch on some of these areas, but we have 7 minutes left to attempt to answer some of the questions and provide some answers, and anything we can't do now, we will do it by way of feedback as the time is limited. So Anne, over to you, and direct the questions to the relevant speaker, if that's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And thanks everybody else, because there's some really, really brilliant presentations there. If we can sort of step back to Alison's presentation, we've had a couple of questions for Alison specifically. And again, just one here, it says, in terms of the NEIRF, does a CIC have to be set up as part of the funding grant? If so, what is the reason for this?
Okay, so we're talking about community interest companies. So the answer is no, you don't have to have a community interest company, but part of the NEIRF funding will help applicants look at the legal aspects and the governance around the bid. So as Dan was talking about in his presentation as well, that special purpose vehicle, there needs to be some way of setting up a structure that will manage the income generation, external investment and the repayment processes, etc. So it doesn't need to be a kick, but there needs to be some kind of structure.
Thanks, Alison. And could I ask anybody who's replying to questions to keep their answers brief as they possibly can, please?
Another question for you, Alison. Is there any consideration regarding the potential benefit to the health sector, mental and physical health support groups and the individuals they support?
Okay, so in terms of the goals of the NEIRF, it's about meeting the requirements of the 25-year environment plan, but there is one of the goals is around enhancing beauty, heritage and engagement in the natural environment. So I think it would probably come under that. So the 25-year plan goes on to talk about making sure there is high quality and accessible natural spaces, particularly in urban areas. And it encourages more people to spend time in the natural environment. So if you could link a project that picks up that aspect, then that would be eligible. And I think we'd heard about that from some of Jenny's talk, how keen people are to engage. So yeah.
Thanks, Alison. A question here for Dan. What happens after 8 years or even 20 years? Some of the measures required for flood risk are essentially irreversible. They would not be able to go back to using the land for conventional agriculture and demand an income that way.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so as part of kind of the legal contracts that we're developing is that the CIC will be responsible for looking at, you know, those further income revenue streams. So the buyers actually have an opportunity to go into another kind of 10 years of agreement. Obviously, by that point, the capital will have been paid off. So those, you know, what we require from the buyers would significantly reduce. But that is, you know, responsibility of that CIC that we just mentioned before to really drive that. And I think, you know, that is one of the beauties of having a community interest company at the heart of this, or social enterprise driven, is that, you know, there's nobody profiting from this. It's all about trying to kind of make sure that flow of capital is going to the right places.
Cheers, Dan. 3 minutes left, Dan, so be particular. Choose the right question.
There's one question, if I can just answer. Is that all right, Brian? There was one about somebody's asked, I think it's Mickey, or I can't see the writing, sorry. It says, meaningful maps cannot be produced from existing data in many cases. On the ground advisors are still required. And absolutely. And what I was meaning was that the data that we're collecting daily, the basic payment data, the land management data that we are collecting can be translated, is what I meant. I'm not suggesting we're using out of date old data. What I was meaning was that there's quite a few farmers around us now who are being asked to offer the opportunity to spend £5,000 or £6,000 to have a shiny natural capital map that I'm sure a lot of the NGOs would actually provide for them by doing some of these translations. So I was just trying to, but it's definitely around real-time data and advice. So thank you for that.
Good stuff, thanks. Anne, have you got a good one?
There's lots of good ones. I guess there's some comments around payments. So a comment on income foregone is an amazingly bad idea. I don't know if anybody wants to sort of comment on that one and what the thinking is around payments for some of these activities.
Yeah,
Dan, do you want to have a
yeah,
go
absolutely.
At that one?
I completely agree. We've actually put on a 4 times multiplier into that income forgone, so it's, you know, a really attractive offer. You know, I am also looking at currently adding in a biodiversity metric to enable a payments by result, so a top up, so really to incentivize kind of farmers and landowners to kind of go beyond that kind of, you know, the minimum requirement, to make sure they really immerse themselves in kind of understanding why we're doing it and why that is actually an asset to their business. And I think there was also another question around, you know, I think farmers are also interested in producing food. Absolutely agree. You know, it's got to be, we've got to look at a kind of sustainable farming model here. We've also got to appreciate though that, you know, we've got to look at addressing our climate and biodiversity crisis, because if not, we're not going to be able to produce food. If we don't tackle this, you know, that it might seem quite kind of dramatic, but that is ultimately the end line, is that if we don't look after our environment now, we won't be able to produce food.
Jenny or Alison, do you want to add anything to that in terms of payments?
I'd be very happy to, if that's okay. Yeah, I mean, payments to me, particularly in Elm, are absolutely hinge on its success. And I think the great disappointment from the Elms engagement group over the last 4 years is that there was an opportunity to create a payments for ecosystem services which wouldn't be challenged by the world trade rules around commodity production. So I think that the real problem that we've got at the moment is because the government's doing sort of trade agreements internationally, that it's really worried about the world trade rules. And as Elm is being designed as an agri-environment scheme, it will be can take consideration for the world trade rules. And that is just such a shame, because if they had realised the vision of creating something that was based around ecosystem services, that landscapes that deliver those multiple benefits could be invested in a way that would actually enable, you know, our fantastic hills and moorlands and all those things that deliver multiple benefits to actually be invested in. The idea that you have an income foregone calculation based on sort of like reduction in productivity is so out of date, and that, you know, the whole move is around regenerative soils, regenerative agriculture, you know, building organic matter, all those things which actually, you know, should be investable in, and we shouldn't be doing any form of calculation based around income foregone from conventional farming. So the only thing that we can do at the moment is to say, well, actually, if elm is then going to displace all these other incomes that we've talked about today, then you need to do your calculation based on that, or you go to alternatives like Dan is and saying, you know, let's have a look at a completely different mechanism for incentivizing farmers, and actually abandon what the government has suggested that might be a mechanism for elm if it's based on that income foregone, particularly if it displaces and can't be co-located with these other payment mechanisms. And actually that's what I'm going to be reporting to the EFRA committee next week, is the opportunity for elm must be salvaged in my view, but it's getting a bit late in the day, but there we go. Oh, wrong one.
I suppose just thinking about that, Jenny, how can we sort of incentivize some of these opportunities? Because I know from working with many farmers, it can be quite challenging to do that, and somebody has commented about the food production side of things, and that's really, really important to farmers, that it's what they do. So how do we sort of change that mindset? So it's not just about money, is it? It is about something more than that. So it's about that conversation around how we use land and what we do with it. So how can we sort of change that? I see that as
guardianship. I see that as guardianship of the farming communities, having the guardianship where, you know, delivering food from those landscapes is an essential part, is an essential ecosystem service, and it's something that people just take for granted, that we have food, and, you know, and actually our own food is what's so important. But the point being that if you want to reduce the number of livestock on a landscape that's going to then have a payment that then supports the fact that the farmer's going to get more payments for the fact that they've, you know, sequestered more carbon or got more water, that's a survivable model from a business. What isn't survivable is if you say, oh, you have to reduce your productivity based on income foregone, so you've got less food and you're not being rewarded for the services from that landscape. So that's the point I'm trying to make, is that we, from our perspective, that the inspiration around regenerative agriculture is phenomenal. If we can actually monetize the ecosystem services that are coming from landscapes, we could actually crack food inequality, because at the moment only really wealthy people can afford to eat food that comes from thriving, healthy, you know, extensively produced landscapes, or you know, heritage wheats that don't have the yield of intensive wheats. But actually, you know, we can still produce enough food. We can go into some market gardening. We can end up having a matrix of food that's supplied and stacked enterprises, and all of that stuff is possible. But at the moment, those opportunities just aren't really being incentivized or designed into the system. They're just sort of like saying, you know, reduce your conventional agriculture and then these things will happen, but that's not going to make it survivable for people losing a support payment. So I think that it's really essential that the government take the seriousness of the situation. We've done an economic evaluation of the reduction of BPS in Gloucestershire, and currently it's £500 million a year that is given in basic payment in Gloucestershire. That's a huge amount of money to actually lose over the next year annually, you know, obviously incrementally. But the opportunities are there for farmers if the investment in there being able to diversify into different relocalization and building soil carbon and all the stuff we talked about is actually structured and supported. And elm needs to be the catalyst for that, and the way that we attribute function to the land and monetize the function of the land, and food is integral to that from my view, as is clean water. And so, you know, the opportunities are there. And it's just very frustrating that there seems to be other things that are blocking this, which seems to be world trade and a fear of us trading. And that, if I may just quickly finish, is that United Nations, you know, and the World Trade Organization over 10 years ago have said we need a different mechanism to be able to support and incentivize our land managers to deliver on climate resilience. And I think they would have welcomed the UK or England designing something that actually was unique, that actually could be shared globally, so other nations could invest globally into land management and not still be tied and running scared of world trade rules that are out of date, and tie us to income forgone for commodities. So sorry. Thank you.
No, that's
complicated stuff.
Sorry, Brian.
What did
No,
you say, Brian? Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
Do you want to speak, Adam? Sorry.
No, back to you, Brian. If you need to say something yet.
No, I'm just saying that the complexities and the challenges at this point in time. I was just going to mention free trade deals, but perhaps I don't want to go there just now. It might be too sore an issue to scratch, but it really is, and I think this is where the need to be able to present sort of solutions as well as sort of our thoughts are really important. So hopefully some of the stuff that we've been developing and some of the input to the future scheme will sort of have an impact, but complicated, but good to hear that they are being raised and put in front of the people that need to see them. All I was going to say, Alan, was that I muddled up the finish time, so we've got another 8 minutes left for any questions that haven't been attempted, and hopefully Jenny, Dan and Alison can stay with us for the next 8 minutes. Back to you, Anne.
Thanks, Brian. I was going to ask a follow-on question from that, really, to Alison, actually, about do you think that your NERF grant can be really transformational? Do you think we can get to that sort of scale of change that we need by that sort of approach? And you know, how quickly do you think it might take us to get there?
Yeah, sorry. I think that's $1 million question, isn't it? How long? I mean, obviously, from the NERF programme, we're hoping it's a 3-year programme. And I think it will be very much the start of that process. And one of the real aspects we want to get out of that is to understand what the barriers are to that process as well. So it's very much a learning programme, and hopefully we'll be able to feed that back into Defra policy as we go through the process as well. So it's difficult to answer the how long question. And I can sense, obviously, from the questions and comments that are coming through now, it really, you know, ideally this would have happened several years ago, so we could start feeding in earlier. And I obviously sense the frustration that's coming from people, but it will be the start of that process.
And can I make one more comment about the sort of like support payments? Because my understanding from people who are cleverer than me, like Professor Dwyer, Janet Dwyer at the Countryside Community Research Institute, is that local authorities aren't tied to the same agri support rules that central government is, and so creating partnerships and mechanisms where you pay farmers for ecosystem services, like, you know, Dan's suggesting in some of these IRF. Local authorities may be some of the purchasers of some of the private investment services, because, you know, they are going to be tied by the duties under the Environment Act. That actually there's opportunities for sort of relocalization of some of these funding supplies that might get around this current world trade glitch effectively. So some quite interesting stuff there around relocalization of funding, which sounds a bit like your convener pot, Dan, that you were talking about. You know, there is this aspiration to have these county-based pots that align all this funding, which is quite interesting how it might play out.
Go for it, Dan, if you've got something to add.
Well, no, I mean, I do like that kind of, you know, that local model. I think farmers have, you know, feel that's, you know, the locally driven targets, it's not local enough. It doesn't take into account kind of, you know, especially upland farmers as well. And I think the feedback that we've had from, you know, farmers that we've engaged with, they really like that model, that, you know, we've got a local contact in that area, they've got continuity. And, you know, I do actually think that they quite like that kind of not-for-profit kind of at the heart of it, and nobody's profiting. It is just a mechanism really to, you know, make sure the money's going at the right, you know, to the right places. And yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Any other questions there, Anne, that are flashing at you?
Yeah, so I want to move to this one really, which is around advice, and you've all sort of touched on this, the complexity of it all, because I think it is hugely overwhelming. And part of, you know, our series of webinars has really been to try to get some of this information over across to farmers and through our facilitation groups, but it's still hugely complex. And today I think we've sort of demonstrated how complex it is, and there are, as you've sort of talked about, Jenny, particularly the substantial number of opportunities, but how can we get those messages across effectively? How can we just give that advice? What is the best way to do that?
Well, I suppose the model that we use is that at the moment in Gloucester, the way that we're structured, and it may be that it's useful for others, and as we learn from others too, is that when we're trying to give advice on a farm, we'll do that scoping, we'll try and work out and contextualize the land, and then we'll link them. We always look at the catchments, because you can't manage soil without managing water. The catchment partnerships create such a brilliant opportunity for alignment of all of the different stakeholders. I think we've got 220 stakeholders in the Upper Thames Catchment Partnership. And the idea of the forum is that, you know, they can bring forward all our friends in the Environment Agency and friends in water companies and friends in local authorities. You know, they all bring to the table what it is that they might, you know, have funding available for. And then that feeds up in connection with our protected landscapes up to the local nature partnership, that then creates this sort of aligned strategic planning for the whole county that's then mitigating against human pressures such as development and growth and, you know, infrastructure and housing and all that other stuff, so that we can start to assess the land around in the county in relation to all those different strategic priorities. But from a point of view of actually giving advice on the ground, once you've got those friends within those partnerships, you know, you're able to signpost the farmer to the opportunities that might, as I said earlier, be funded by lots of different mechanisms. I mean, at the moment we've got one where there's a wetland creation project that could be funded 5 different ways from the catchment partnership. It's really up to the farmer to decide which route they want to go, how long they want to tie the land up for, hopefully for perpetuity, because it's very wet. But, you know, as I said, there's lots of different mechanisms, and I think that's our role as facilitators, is to be the conduit between, you know, the complexity of governance that we've created and helping all of the co-delivery through the public, private and third sectors, but actually facilitating that down on the ground in a way that is supportive to the person that we meet, their lives, their livelihood, their business, and actually valuing the farmers that we meet, which we know we all do as facilitators, and actually helping them to make the transition for their business, for where they live, where they farm, and actually try and unpick this complexity for them. And in doing that, I think that, you know, that actually starts to build opportunities for more opportunities, because that once they collaborate, but they become more informed as to what those decisions are that you're helping for them to make, and that becomes very informative, hopefully.
Thanks, Jenny. And I think that brings us to the end of the allocated time. But yeah, good point to end on, Jenny. I think the challenges we face, the encyclopedic knowledge that you require if you're going to be an advisor, plus the sort of the ability to actually make it happen, is a series of really exciting challenges to face up to over the next period. But hopefully these webinars and the fact that we've got the groups in place gives some mechanism to help to build that bridge to that future. So I'd just like to thank everybody who's attended today, especially our presenters, Alison, Dan, Jenny and Paul. And thanks again to Anne and Liz for setting this up and making it work as smoothly as it has done. So we have another webinar, and I'm not sure if you've got the details to hand, but we can share them with you as part of the dissemination. But just to bring it to a close, thank you all very, very much. It's been another good webinar with some really, really exciting content. So thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon, and see you again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye.